Hello again, Chinwaggers. Steve and Asma here, and today we've got some really fun stuff lined up. First up, the Q&A session from our live show at Harvard University. Harvard, maybe you've heard of it. Some smart people there. Then I am thrilled to share something special from our time at Sketchfest in San Francisco. This was just a great festival in San Francisco every year. Super fun, and I really enjoyed it. Then we have my interview with Beth Lisick and Arline Klatz, recorded live at the iconic Great American Music Hall for their fantastic podcast, Porchlight Storytelling Series. Let's get into it.
We always are interested to hear if people have questions.
Yeah, we would love for people
Nobody
with
has
questions.
to have a question, and you certainly don't have to have a question about anything we just talked about.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be about standing stones.
No, it doesn't need to be about standing stones
thing.
or anything. Who has a question? Somebody actually does? This guy looks like he's got a good question. Look at this guy.
Don't count on it. But thank you for coming. It's been an honor to listen to you. At the beginning, you mentioned that like mountains could be monoliths.
Yeah.
Could you expand on that? Kind of talk about what you
can't
researched?
expand on that. I don't know what the hell. No, that was one of the most confusing things, was that it was like it can be a naturally occurring thing or it can be a man-made thing. And I was like, that's a pretty wide sort of swath of stuff.
Yeah.
Like it was saying that the one sort of natural formation it talked about was, I think it's called Uluru. It's the rock in the middle of...
Ayers Rock in Australia.
Ayers Rock, but it's not called Ayers Rock anymore.
Not anymore.
Thank you, sir. It's called Uluru.
Sorry.
No. But that's, I think, got petroglyphs all over it. I think it's carved
does it?
out. I think so. And that's got probably a lot. But that also, because when I think about it, the very little I know about any of that kind of art, the indigenous art down there, I think there are insects in those things. I think some of the creatures they show are insects. But anyway, that was one of the megaliths they talk about, was Uluru, was the rock in the middle of, which is sacred and weird that it's right in the middle like that. It seems like a really powerful place.
So that happened just naturally, and then it became a spiritual place?
Yeah.
I see.
I think they see it as the kind of axis of the world. It's this sort of PowerPoint where it's the kind of navel of the world kind of thing.
Makes sense.
For those people. Yeah, it does make sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Good question.
Yeah, nice question. Oh, now this guy.
Hello.
Hi.
You're probably really into the Droids. And I think they're related to the Gauls, right? Because they were both maybe...
Yeah, no,
Yes.
I think they all, yeah.
Okay, because I was just thinking of, like asterisk.
Did you say droids or druids?
Druids.
Thank you. You said droids, and I was like, dude,
I don't think
that's
so.
that's somebody else's
too.
podcast.
I heard droids.
I think when you listen it back, you'll be wrong.
Okay, all right, that's very good. Very good.
We play it back.
Yeah,
But
right
you were anyway. I think of the Gauls, and I think of like asterisk and obelisk. You
Yeah.
know, like the French comic, because like obelisk, he would always carry like an obelisk, right?
He had a menhir. It's
A
called a
menhir, right.
menhir.
So
Yeah.
would that be considered
Yeah.
a thing?
It's a standing stone,
It's a standing stone,
basically.
okay.
Obelix made standing stones, I think.
Yeah.
And they have druids. There's a druid in those. Did you read those growing up?
Yeah, I love those.
Okay, man. All right. Those are great.
Yeah,
Those
they're
are these
fun.
French comics that are sort of like funny things about the Gauls beating up the Romans all the time. They're hilarious.
From what period? When were they made?
When are those written? Like the 60s? 70s? Oh, come on. You go to Harvard? When were they?
Yeah, I wasn't alive.
Yeah. What's a young person like you reading that for? What
It was a good way of learning French, you know?
Oh, okay.
Because you read
Yeah.
the comics, and I read
They translated them.
read the
Tintin.
1010 novels too.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
those are great
graphic
too.
novels.
Those
yeah.
are Belgian
Yeah.
novels, so don't get.
Well, language. You know,
Ooh,
same
okay.
language.
Yeah, same language, different
Yeah.
culture.
And good
But-
drawings.
Great drawings.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a druid in Asterix, Getafix, the druid. Yeah, there's a druid, and Obelix is the kind of big dumb guy, and there's the little smart guy, Asterix. I actually did a voice for an Asterix movie. I got to do Asterix's voice, which I was really excited about. It was a huge hit, believe me, this movie. It was an international sensation, this movie. But he's a menhir craftsman. He carries around this stone, and the whole sort of joke is, what is the point of these things? And he sort of leaves them around all the time, and so he's left all these standing stones around. Obelix, yeah.
I've seen the cartoons, but I've never read through them.
Yeah, it's great.
I know the drawing style.
Yeah, they're great. They're really great. Is that it? Does anybody else have a question? Oh, here we go. Now this woman back here.
This has been so interesting. Thank you. My question is actually about the instrument that you were playing and what is it? And how did you find a knack and a talent?
Playing is a generous word. Playing is a very generous approach to what I do with that.
The theremin.
It's a theremin. It's a theremin. It's a kind of, real theremins. That's a sort of like easy, cheap theremin you can buy. Anybody can buy a real theremin. I don't know. Do you know about the whole history of theremins? I don't really know.
I don't really know.
It's a guy, I think he was a Russian guy, invented it sort of in like the 20s or something.
That sounds
And the
right.
actual things are these big boxy things. And I don't really know what the principle it operates on or anything. But I like it because it makes that kind of science fiction movie sound.
Yeah.
It sounds like things from like the 50s and Forbidden Planet and stuff like that.
But there's like 3 people on the planet that can really play it.
Really
It's
can
like-
play it. And people who I can't. I don't know what I'm doing with it at all. I can sort of get funny sounds out of it. But the real people have the real knack for it can play. There's music written just for theremin, and people can do it. It's extraordinarily delicate little movements that you can get real. I mean, I'm like doing all this to get a sound out of it. And
You're the punk theremin
I'm
player.
a punk theremin player. Yeah. I always apologize. I usually apologize after I do that to anybody that actually plays the theremin. But people can, and it's extraordinary when somebody can actually play it. It's amazing. But he's a real blues guitarist who's played with real bands. He played with Bo Diddley and Albert King.
Buddy Guy.
Yeah. And he's actually played for real. So I thought it'd be nice. We thought it'd be nice.
Yeah,
to
we
just
have
play
a kind
sometimes.
of, it's like the paranormal blues band, you and me.
That's right. That's right.
We've got
Anyway, that's a
UFOs.
theremin. Yeah, there you go. That it? Anybody else?
Here.
Yeah?
I was wondering how you guys picked out the topic for today's talk, like the monolith.
Why did we
stuff.
pick the one today, this subject?
Yeah, why'd you pick big rocks?
It's a great question.
It's a really
I
good
think it's
question.
a pressing issue for everyone, the big rocks. So we just looked at the news, the headlines of the news and said,
That's right. Ripped from the headlines.
Yeah,
This
exactly.
one was,
That's-
it was a monolith
how
that
do we,
appeared.
it is funny, we just talk about shit that interests the both of us, and the weirder the better, right?
It's kind of what interests us in the moment sort of goes. I mean, like I say, we talked about werewolves the other day, and we'd been wanting to talk about werewolves for a while. It just sort of seemed, I don't know. It just seemed like the
we
thing
like
to talk
sort of
about.
the mysterious, edge of the known kind of
Uncanny,
topics.
the uncanny.
Yeah, the uncanny. And this is just one of them.
There's one of them. Seemed interesting. And then we get to actually do half-assed research and find out about stuff. And it's actually, it's interesting. I now know all about reformed Druids in Minnesota. I know everything there is to know about it. Anybody else? Anyone else?
I was surprised that you didn't bring up this is Spinal Tap and Stonehenge.
I thought of that, but I thought everybody here is under, most of the people here are young, and I thought, is anybody going to know what that is? But I watched actually a very funny film. It wasn't meant to be funny, but I watched a guy who had a whole theory about the acoustics of Stonehenge. He's got this whole theory that it was some kind of liturgical place where people, because he theorized that the harmonics in there were amazing.
And it echoes in a weird way, too.
Yeah, and it
right?
echoes in a weird way. So he built a tiny Stonehenge, and he put it in this weird sound chamber, and he did all stuff, but it looked like the thing in Spinal Tap, which was a movie. Oh my God! Do you know what it is? You know. See,
Yes.
you know a lot there, dude.
A lot
you
of
got it
people
all
know.
down, right? And they build the wrong size Spinal Tap. They build the wrong size Stonehenge,
Yeah.
right? Because
This
the guy
is a
writes it.
sophisticated crowd. They knew 2001. They know
did.
Spinal Tap.
Yeah, they
Very
did.
good.
Yeah,
So I'll ask a semi-serious question.
sure.
It's interesting when you talk about the past and you theorize about it. And as a philosopher, how do you avoid imposing today on things that happened such a long time ago? Does it matter if people knew physics to put rocks on top of each other? Somehow we keep thinking that's impossible because they didn't understand the underlying ratios or leverage.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
doesn't it feel a little imposing our current views?
To me, it does. I mean, I think that when you look at some of these phenomena, there is a tendency to think of it from the point of view of our sciences. And in fact, what they are much simpler. This is not to denigrate because they're astounding, but they're really practical engineering problems, which are solved sort of much easier than we thought they were. And you'll also see you'll see some ethnocentrism laid on top of this, like, oh, these guys couldn't have done this, so it must have been aliens or some other civilization. And I do think that kind of stuff, we have to avoid that wherever possible. But one of the things that really does intrigue me is if you create something like Stonehenge, which can read the solstice and the equinox, I always ask myself, like, why on earth would you need such precision? All you really need to know is approximately when should we be planting stuff, and harvesting stuff. And that's a fairly vague parameter. And you can tell from the changes in the weather and what the animals are doing. So why do you need anything that's so precise unless it has some kind of religious, ideological significance?
Because if you screw it up, right, you're going to piss the sun off or something. Yeah, you're going to piss the moon and the sun off.
That's my guess.
Now that makes a lot of sense. But I would think it's so hard not to impose.
Right.
The present.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable.
It's really hard. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think even all history is us trying to tell the story of now, but through the lens of as a reimagined history.
For sure. And that's the stuff we were talking about, these guys having this sort of romanticizing the Druids and all that stuff is the same thing. Yeah. It's crazy. Oh, dear.
Just a quick question. I mean, I think a lot of the fascination has to do with the age, of the obelisk or the stone structures and how they got there. But I wonder about modern day, land art. So if you look at, Robert Smithson, Michael Heitzer, and some of the artists these days are trying to replicate.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's eventually going to be equally as interesting? Or I just don't know if that interest exists right now, or maybe that will grow over time.
That's interesting. Yeah. Will that stuff have a meaning in the same way? Like that James Turrell, that crazy crater that he's mining and setting all those weird light effects up in. And actually, what's his name, who just died? Richard Serra, who just died, built these amazing monoliths, this series of 4 monoliths in the desert in Qatar, I think. Did I say that right, Qatar?
Yeah.
Those, when I look at those, I think those are kind of astonishing. And those look like they will last at fascination. But knowing who did it, kind of, we all know who did that. We all know who built those big spiral earth things. Is that Robert Smithson who does the spiral stuff? And who's the guy who did the lightning field? Have you ever seen that? Is that Walter DeMaria? Is that his name? Who built this crazy field with all these lightning rods, so it's like the lightning will do all this crazy stuff and everything.
But I don't think those are the ones that are going to last for thousands of years. It's just going to be a shell of the Sears Tower in Chicago in 10,000 years. They're going to be like, what was this all about?
That would be more what's interesting.
It's going to be Planet of the Apes shit.
Jesus Christ, man. That's so grim. But you're probably right. Yeah, that'll be far more interesting. Yeah, than these.
But all of those recent ones, like the stainless steel ones or whatever, from what I read in my research, they all then disappeared and ended up in collections.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it makes me think it's kind of a big art project.
I thought some artist claimed them, didn't he?
Someone did,
but it didn't turn out to necessarily be true.
I think it's still ambiguous.
I suppose you would want to claim it and get attention to yourself and be that kind of guy. Yeah, I guess so.
Well, I have a question sort of about the energy lines.
Yeah.
So is that more of you could figure out the energy lines and then there happen to be the stones along them?
Sure.
Or do you know if it was more of if we drew lines between these things, then they would be on the same line because we drew the line?
Oh, interesting.
That's a really good question.
Which came first?
That's a really good. Man, you just destroyed the whole energy line theory. Just bam, just blew that out of the water. I think I don't know enough about it. I know that
Don't let that stop you.
I do know they're called ley lines, Ley, and they're named after a guy named Willie Ley. I know that much, and I think he was a fairly legit guy. I don't think he was a complete wacko. I don't either, but I do think that it's a good question. I mean, certainly, it does seem like he went, oh, wow, look, that line connects those things. So it does feel a little bit suspect. I don't know. I don't know enough about it. But I do know they're called ley lines, Ley. And supposedly, I don't know how you would know it's a real thing. It all relates to weird shit with dowsing and pendulums and all this
Well,
stuff.
not only that, but look at all of traditional Chinese medicine, which is
Yeah.
still practiced, is
Yeah.
based on the idea of meridians that
Yeah.
are just on the body,
Yeah.
and acupuncture is supposed to be accessing them.
Does that have any like analog on the earth? The stuff in
That's
like
what I was
Chinese
saying. Is
medicine
maybe
does it?
there's because
Yeah, like geomancy. It's all
yeah.
like that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which is reading. What
Well,
the
when
fuck
I-
does that even mean? I use that word and I don't even know what it means.
geomancy. When I was living in Shanghai, I was trying to rent an apartment. He's like, look out the window here. This has amazingly good feng shui because
Well,
the
that's feng
Suzhou
shui.
Creek.
That's geomancy?
But that's related to the lines of qi flow. And so it's all the same thing on the body, and
Right.
in nature is qi energy.
Right. Well, that's what these ley lines.
Yeah, that's
kind
what
of
it sounds like.
And it's a different version of that. Is what it is. But I don't know enough about it actually. But I'll sit here and talk about it like I do. Like I know what I'm talking about. Excellent.
Well, there's a tendency to some people want to dismiss this stuff because you can't corroborate it. You don't have like direct evidence for
UFOs.
Well, yeah, that too. But then like these energy lines, it may be possible that some instruments will detect something like this eventually. Like you can't rule it out.
Right.
You can't. Nothing follows from like a question mark.
Yeah.
But also you can't rule it out altogether.
We talked to a guy from here, an astrophysicist from here recently, Avi Loeb,
Avi Loeb.
who has
Yeah.
a lot of theories about stuff. When he's
right.
kind of talks that way.
Yeah.
That, that he's sort of setting the goalpost out somewhere. That's
Yeah,
gonna,
keep an open
we haven't
mind
gotten
is what
there
he's
yet.
saying.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Here's my interview with Beth Lisick and Arline Klatz.
Thank you, David Owen, for booking such a great show, and all the shows at Sketchfest are good, so check out their website because there's lots more.
Look at my beautiful friend and co-host Arline Klatz.
And this is my beautiful friend and co-host Beth Lisick, all the way here from New York.
We started this show 22 years ago. This year, I know, back when our children were babies, and then I'm like, no, I don't even have a uterus. Like, things have changed. I don't normally tell jokes. I just said that because I thought it was gross and funny. But it is, when we started, we were co-workers at a website, www.sfgate.com.
It used to be really cool, and
Very cool
we
website.
shared a cubicle, and
Yeah.
our boss had a rear view mirror on her cubicle so she could watch when we were joking around and not doing our work,
Yeah.
which was a lot.
Yeah,
actually.
but that's where we met, and we started this storytelling series at the Hemlock Tavern on Polk Street. Yes,
It's gone. It's gone.
and I know, but we just wanted to get people that we knew that we thought were great storytellers to come and do it. So it was never a comedy thing. It was never a literary thing. It was just like we would be in a cab going somewhere and ask the cab driver to come and tell a story, or because we do really think that everybody has stories to tell. And so one thing that we do in a lot of our shows is we have an audience participation. So we're gonna do that tonight, even though it's gonna be really awkward and hard for people to get up here, but we're just gonna do this.
The theme is travel stories, and we were trying to
Travel
think
stories.
of a good way to make that sound a little sexier, and Kelly came up with
Postcards from the Edge.
What was it?
Postcards from the Edge. Globetrotting.
Truckin'.
What? Yeah.
What else?
I don't know. Planes, trains,
Planes, trains, and automobiles.
I don't know.
Anyway, if you've ever been anywhere and you might have a 1-minute story to tell about that experience,
Has anybody ever been anywhere?
we're gonna call 5 people up to tell 1-minute stories.
1-minute story. So that means if we call you up, you're starting and then Capel, ladies and gentlemen, Mark Capel at the piano.
Mark Capel, besides being the musical director of Porchlight Storytelling Series, is also the musical director of the Red Room Orchestra, and they have a show. They do all these shows of movie soundtracks. So they are doing Harold and Maude on Tuesday night.
In this very room.
It's basically the music of Cat Stevens.
You
but
guys
it's
get into
the soundtrack of Harold and Maude.
Margaret Cho's going to be here.
Margaret is Harold.
Margaret Cho is
Margaret
playing
Cho's Harold.
Harold in the little scenes they do in between.
Just mention it.
There's going to be a lot of surprises. So there's still tickets
You're going to
available
want to
for
come
that.
back here on Tuesday.
If you've never
for
been to
that.
a Red Room show, you haven't really lived. That's the truth.
Yeah, that's going to
Okay.
be great. And then let's talk about who else is back here with Mark Capel. Oh, it's Kelly Stoltz.
Stoltz.
On the guitar. Kelly Stoltz, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between.
Yeah.
Look how cute Larry Mullins
Larry
is there on
Mullins.
his little kit.
Mullins. Larry is normally playing with Nick Cave in the Bad Seeds, but tonight he's playing with Porchlight. So
That's real. That's the truth.
Something for
That's
his
the truth.
resume. He
Sorry,
can
Nick
act.
Cave's drummer. And along with a bunch of other people's drummers. Iggy Pop plays the Swans. Come
And
on.
now Porchlight. So
Yeah.
you never
Yeah,
know.
you know,
where-
it's just
what-
really-
Yeah. Okay.
A couple of gals with a dream who love storytelling.
And song.
And song. So, what's going to happen when you audience members, if we pick you, we don't even know how we're going to pick you yet. We're just
We
going to
haven't
roll
figured
with
it
it when
out.
it happens.
We'll see.
But you'll come up here, and then these guys are going to, when you get to 1 minute, they're going to let you know, and you got to stop. Okay, so be thinking about that, and then should
in the
we
meantime,
bring up our
I
Our
think
storyteller?
we're going to start the show. We're going to start the show with a man who is a philosophy professor at Columbia College
Very
in
smart.
Chicago. He's written 10 books on philosophy, and he is the co-host of the Chinwag podcast with Paul Giamatti. I don't know if you've heard this podcast.
It's
But it's really
fantastic.
good. They talk about esoteric topics and Nostradamus and witches
Ghosts,
and
aliens,
all kinds of
all
crazy
of it.
stuff. And they're both really smart, and it's a lot of fun to listen to. It's called Chinwag. Anyway, here he is. Please welcome Stephen Asma.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our fine organizers and hosts for inviting me and this great band. I thought you guys were going to do a few more choruses or something. All right, I am a philosophy professor, not a comedian. And I basically, in that sort of position, I had the good fortune to get a Fulbright Award, which was to go and teach in China. And this was a few years back, and I thought I would tell you this story because it's a good travel tale. And it was my son and I, and he was about 9 or 10 years old at the time, and we moved to Beijing for me to teach in Beijing. And before we went, the government took us aside, and there was only maybe 4 or 5 of us going to China. I was going to Beijing, others were going to Shanghai, Xi'an, or whatever, and they said, whenever you do not talk about the 3 T's, which is Tiananmen Square, Taiwan, and Tibet. Just don't mention the 3 T's. And I thought, that's fine, I can do that. I have no scruples, it's no problem. So we go there, and it's going fine. In fact, it's great. I'm teaching my class, I'm really enjoying it. I noticed there is a camera in the corner of my classroom, and the light is on all the time. And I said to the students, what is that? And they said, oh, they're filming you. And they're going through your lectures and analyzing them to see if they're okay and that we can pass them and you can stay here. And I thought, well, that's okay. I'll just avoid the 3 T's. It'll be fine. And I was teaching American philosophy. So I was like, can I talk about democracy? And they're like, yeah, we have democracy here. They said, just don't talk about the party. So I was like, okay. So we're there for a while, and I managed to convince my father to come and visit us in China. And my dad is 80 years old. He's never been out of the country. And this is a huge deal, but I was like, come on, you have to come to China. And with a little bit of pushing, he comes. Now, my son and I have been there for maybe 7, 8 months or so, and he shows up. And the first thing we do is we go to the night market. And he's got a bad back and arthritis, and I said, we're gonna set you up with all this traditional Chinese medicine. So we go to the market, and there's tea and ground up roots and tinctures of this and that. And they're like, this will fix your arthritis and this will fix your rheumatism. But the thing about traditional Chinese medicine, if you've been to China, you'll know this is true. The selling point is also, whatever it does for your ailment, it also increases your virility. And they said it will make your penis larger and harder. And so my dad's scooping this up, and And I'm scooping it up, and my son's like, what's going on? And so the next day, though, I said, let's go to, one of the seventh wonders of the world, and let's go to the Great Wall of China. And this is a wonderful trip. It's right outside Beijing. It's a couple hours, kind of in the hinterlands or in the sort of suburbs. We go there, and it's magical. Like, here's my son, 3 generations of my family, my son, me, my dad, all on the Great Wall of China. And it's also like, it's like 180 degrees. And so we're boiling and just frying. And my dad is wilting, but he's being a trooper. And so we're about to leave, and I see, hey, there's an easy way for us to get down. There's a dry summer toboggan route that we could take down. And so we go over to it, and we're looking at it, and it looks like sheet metal that like Boy Scouts have pounded into like a trail. And then the actual sleds that we will ride are like, imagine those old metal garbage cans, you flip it over, and then somebody like drilled a hole through it and put a stick, and that's the brake. And so we're looking at this, and we're like, what could go wrong? Let's do this. So my son is on his sled, my dad is after him, and then I'm the third one. And we start flying down this thing, and it's like this crazy slalom all the way down, and we're picking up speed. And I look up, and there's people on the Great Wall like pointing at us, like, look at the Guilao. These crazy Guilao are like going down the route. And Guilao is a Chinese word which means foreigner. It's oftentimes used to describe foreigners. It literally means white ghost. And so they're saying, the Guilao are going down, the huge Guilao. My dad's really big. I'm kind of big there anyway. And we hit this corner. And meanwhile, like, my son keeps turning around and looking at his grandfather and laughing, and they're all laughing. Isn't this fun? And we hit this corner, and it's a tight turn. And my dad hits it and sails right off the track. And he's like still sitting like he's on the sled, but the sled is separated from him, and he's just soaring through the air like in this Buddha lotus position. And I'm like literally whipping around as he disappears over the ledge. And I'm like, I killed my dad on the Great Wall of China. And my son turns around to see his grandpa, and he's laughing, and he sees me on the track, which doesn't make any sense to him. And so now I'm screaming the 3 T's, Tiananmen Square, Taiwan, Tibet, all the way down to the bottom. And when we get there, there are these people there, and they're like, Mei Wen Ti, no problem, it's okay. And I'm like, what do you mean no problem? Where's my dad? Here, 10 minutes later, he comes and he's got like 2 Chinese workers holding him up. And he's got like, his leg is cut and he's bleeding, but he's laughing. So I'm like, okay, that's a good sign. So I didn't kill him on the Great Wall of China. And then we thought, well, let's go and celebrate. We didn't die. And on the way back to Beijing, we stopped at this restaurant. And it was really like sort of in between countryside and suburb. It was kind of nice, but it was still really countryside. And we go in there to eat and celebrate. And at this point, I'm actually coming down with a cold, and it might have been the stress from this whole thing with my dad. And I said to the waiter, there was like really only one other table there, and it was just us. And the waiter and the maitre d' come up, and I said, "Nimen kui bang mang wo," which means like, can you guys help me out? I said, 我有头痛,我有咳嗽, means like I have a headache, I have a cough. And the 2 of them look at each other, and they're like, oh yeah, we can do this. And then I heard them have this quick exchange, and I can't understand what they're saying. It's too fast, but I hear the word Uguay. And I'm like, what's the word Uguay again? And they go running off in 2 different, somebody knows it out there, I heard you say it. The waiter runs this way, the maitre d' runs this way into the kitchen. And the waiter comes back and he puts a glass in front of me. And I'm like, this is great, there's gonna be some tea, maybe some tinctures, some traditional Chinese medicine. It's gonna be good. And then comes the maitre d' from the kitchen, and he has a giant turtle in his arms, and it's sort of flailing around. And it's not the kind of turtle you're thinking of with like a shell and the tucks its head in. This is a hideous, long nose turtle. The shell is like leathery. It's sort of attached to the skin. It has this horrifying monochromatic brown. Its neck is like a snake, and it's got like a nose that's sort of poking up. It was just really it looked like Gamera from like a kaiju movie or something. So they come out, and my dad and my son are looking at me, and they're like, "What's going to happen now?" And I'm like, "I'm not sure either." And the guy leans over, and he just nicks the throat of the turtle, and the blood pours into the glass. And then I'm just like, cannot be. And he kind of patches it up, puts like a poultice on there. Turtle seems to be okay. He takes the turtle back away. Then the guy comes in and he pours this stuff called baijiu, which is like a white, it's a very strong, hard liquor spirit. And so it's like a shot of that stuff and a shot of turtle blood. And we're just staring at each other, and I'm very much a when in Rome. And now the waiter and the maitre d' are standing next to each other, very, like, this is auspicious. They're super happy that these Gauls have come, and they're gonna have this treat. And so there's no way I'm not. So I did manage to drink it. Because when you add this liquor to it, you could drink anything. It's just so strong. And then I have to report that the next day, I felt much better. And the day after that, I felt better, way better. But despite several inspections and measurements, my penis was the same. Thank you. Chinwag is a production of Treefort Media and Touchy Feely Films, hosted and executive produced by Paul Giamatti and Stephen Asma. Executive producer for Treefort is Kelly Garner, with additional producing by Mary Cholenza. Dan Carey is executive producer for Touchy Feely. Original theme music by Luke Top, with additional music by Via Mardot. Our associate producer is Aidan Brooks. Audio production supervision by Jared Brom and Matt Dyson. Editing and mixing by Jared Brom. Lastly, for more information, go to chinwagpod.fm and find us on Instagram or TikTok at chinwagpod or on Twitter at chinwag_pod.